Today's lesson is all about advanced jazz chords. First, let me play a few of those for you so you'll have an idea what we're going to talk about. Here's an A minor 11th chord. Here's a G dominant 7 flat 5 flat 9. And here's a C 13th chord or C dominant 13th chord. Now, to get these lush, complex sounding chords and chord voicings, you will often need to add higher scale degrees which go beyond the 7th and which might or might not be raised or flattened, namely moved by a semitone up or down. Let's break this concept down. As we've previously seen, scales have degrees, and we can count these degrees all the way up to 14. Let's take the C major scale as an example. And we can start by 1 and count up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is 1 again, but we can keep on going. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and back to 1. Now, just as we've constructed the C major 7th chord by playing the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th degrees of the C major scale, we can now play or extend this by playing additional higher, usually odd degrees. So we can, for example, add the 9th degree to obtain a C major 9th chord. Now I'll make two general comments about voicing such chords, and I'll use the C major 9 as an example. The first is that all of the rules we've seen so far for voicing chords apply to these more advanced chords, meaning that we can double any note. So for example, I can double the C up here and this G up here. And we can also move the notes up or down an octave. So maybe I can take this C major 9 voicing and move this G down here. Maybe move this C up here. And this is a valid C major 9 voicing. I'm not saying it's artistically warranted, but it's a valid voicing. The second point has to do with which notes or degrees we can omit, and we've discussed this already in lesson number 4 when discussing shell voicings. So the rule is that you can omit any note, any degree, except for the 3rd, the 7th, the highest degree, and any altered degree, so any degree that's been flattened or raised. So anything that's not these, you can omit. In the case of our C major 9 chord, we have the 3rd, 7th, and 9th, the highest degree, and we can omit the 1st and the 5th because, well, they're not altered, and they're not 3, 7, or highest. So this means that we can also voice our C major 9 like this. Again, I'm not saying this is artistically desirable, but it is a valid voicing. These rootless, sort of bare-bone voicings usually assume, but not always, that there's a bass player somewhere out there playing the bass, or that you're playing stride piano, namely that you're hitting the bass yourself and then playing the bare-bone kind of voicing. Okay, let's keep going. We've played a C major 9. What about a C major 11? Now, this is a valid chord, but it sounds a bit dissonant. The reason for this is the interval between the 3rd degree and the 11th. This is a minor 9th interval, which is an octave plus a semitone, and it sounds pretty dissonant. This is why you will rarely encounter plain major 11th chords. Rather, what you will often encounter are major 11th chords where the 11th degree is raised. So this would be a C major sharp 11. Now this notation is a bit confusing. Is this a C major chord with an added sharp 11, or is this the full C major sharp 11th chord? And to clarify this, people will often notate this as a C major 9 sharp 11. So you're playing the C major 9 and then adding the sharp 11. Let's take next a C major 13th chord. Again, you'll not often find a C major 13th chord in itself, but usually you'll get either a sharpened 11th degree, or there's an implicit understanding that you're going to omit the 11th. So either play this or this. Let's do a dominant chord. Let's play a C 13th chord, or you could equally say a C dominant 13th chord. So here, again, we take C major scale, play the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and flattened 7th degrees. Now we add the 9th, 11th, and 13th. As before, I've commented that you will often not add the 11th when playing the C 13th chord because of the clash, or you'll end up playing a C 13th sharp 11th chord. So you'll take, instead of the 11th, you'll play the sharp 11. Now, we can come up with a simpler voicing for this chord using the rules we've already seen. So let's not play the sharp 11, let's omit it. And what we have here is we have a chord with the 1st, 3rd, 5th, flat 7, 9th, and 11th degrees. We can omit any unaltered degree, which is not the 3rd, 7th, or highest degree, the 13th. So this means we can omit the 9th, the 5th, and the 1st. This requires a bit too much stretching, so I'm just going to move things around, move this E up an octave, and I'll play this down here. And here's kind of a bare bone shell voicing, we can call it, for a C 13th chord. Again, you can play this with stride to make it sound fuller. Some people will also add the 9th degree back in there. Dominant chords will often alter one or more of their degrees. For example, here's a chord that we played at the beginning of this video, a G dominant 7 flat 5 flat 9. Let's figure this one out. So we start with a G major scale, and we start by constructing the G dominant 7, playing the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and flattened 7th degrees. Now we add the 9th, and we flatten both the 5th and the 9th. And now all we have to do is move notes around. So we'll take this F and double it, take this D flat and move it up here, and here's a nice sounding voicing for a G dominant 7 flat 5 flat 9. Let's do one last example for a minor chord this time. Minor chords will rarely alter any of the extended degrees, although it is certainly possible. How about an A minor 11? So take an A major scale, play the 1st, flattened 3rd, 5th, flattened 7th degrees, and add the 9th and 11th. Sounds pretty good. Notice that there's no clash between the 3rd and the 11th here, because the 3rd is not really the 3rd, it's the flattened 3rd. So this is not a minor 9th interval, it's a major 9th. Sounds fine. As before, we are free to move things around, and what I've played at the beginning of the video is an A minor 11th chord, and you'll see that if you pay attention and break it down, that I'm playing the 1st, 5th, 9th, 3rd, 7th, and 11th degrees. So they're all in there, and it gives us a wide, spacious kind of sounding chord, which is quite beautiful. So now we come to an interesting conundrum. Things were complex enough with just seventh chords. Now it seems like there's really an infinite number of chords, possibilities, variations, voicings. How on earth can we deal with such levels of complexity? How can we practice it? Now, the answer is that we cheat. Yes, that's reality. We basically look at how great piano players of the past have voiced these chords and we copy them. And if you do this, you will come to realize that there are some shapes that return over and over across history, piano history, and that really boils things down to a much more manageable, still large, but manageable set of voicings and chords. Let's take a look at how some famous pianists voiced different types of chords. And we'll start with the minor 11th chord, and the voicing that was, and probably still is, well, still often used by Herbie Hancock. In this voicing, you play the first and fifth in the left hand, and I'm playing an A minor 11 here. So I'm playing the first and fifth in the left hand, and the third, 11th, fifth, and ninth. The first, third, 11th, 7th, and 9th degrees in the right hand. Because the first and fifth are unaltered, we can omit them and just play this as a left hand voicing for A minor 11. Here's the same thing for a C minor 11. And if you want, you can play stride piano. You can hit the bass and jump around, or for an A. Bill Evans was a master of parsimonious voicings. Here's a variation of his for an A minor 6-9 chord. We haven't really discussed 6 chords yet. We will, because these are intimately connected to diminished chords, but I'm saving this for a later lesson. But you can pretty much use them or try to use them whenever you see a minor 7 or a minor major 7th chord. This voicing for the A minor 6-9 is this. So the full voicing would be an A minor with a 6 and a 9. And this implies, the use of the F sharp implies that you're in a Dorian or melodic minor scale, for example. So this will clash with Aeolian or natural minor melodies. You can invert this voicing, or, well, first of all, not even invert, you can just learn to play it in all keys. For example, here's an F minor 6-9. And you can play it with stride, so you can hit the bass note. Sounds pretty good. Here's a dominant 13th chord voicing favored by Bill Evans, with no altered degrees. Now here it's shown for a C13th, and you will already recognize this because we've already played this. I've shown you how this is constructed. You're basically playing here the 7th, 9th, 3rd, and 13th degrees. Bill Evans would rarely play the root. Now, whenever you have a voicing that has the 7th or the 3rd in the bass, it's worthwhile inverting it twice and memorizing also the form that has the 3rd or 7th in the bass. So for this voicing, which has the 7th, what I can do is I can move this A, let's say, down an octave, and this E down an octave, so I'm inverting twice in this case. And I'm getting a voicing for C13th, which has the 3 down here. And this is useful when you want to move around the keyboard. So if you only knew one form, you could play. But if you knew both forms, you could alternate between them to help your harmony move, have more flexibility when choosing which left hand voicing you end up playing. Here's another Bill Evans voicing, this time for a dominant 9th chord with a sharp 5 and sharp 9 degrees. I'll show it for a G chord. So this would be a G7 sharp 5 sharp 9, and the notes I'm playing are B, D sharp, F, and A sharp, which are the 3rd, sharp 5, flattened 7th, and sharp 9 degrees of the corresponding G major scale. Notice that I'm playing the 3rd degree here, so it's worthwhile inverting twice, and also memorizing this form that has the 7th in the bass. So again, this gives you some ability to move around with your left hand. Let's put everything we've seen to use. And we're going to play the ballad that we've been coming back to throughout this course, first with simple 7th chords, just like we've done so far. And then we're going to use the more advanced higher degrees with tensions. So let me first remind you how it sounds like in its simple form. Not bad. Now, let's use our extended, fancier chords. Here's how that sounds. Much more interesting. Let's briefly talk about practicing. And there are 3 things you can do to practice these extensions. The first is to transpose each of the voicings I've shown you in all 12 keys. And remember, every time you have a form that has the 3rd, also be sure to memorize the form that has the 7th in the bass. That's a bit of work, but these chords will serve you for a lifetime. So take this seriously and work diligently through all 12 scales for each form. And every time you come across a voicing from a pianist that you like, try to either transcribe it or find a transcription and memorize that particular voicing. The second thing is to take the ballad I've played and transpose it to all 12 keys using the more advanced forms of the chords. The third exercise is to take jazz standards and see how they sound when you use these extended chords. It takes a bit of experimentation, and you'll discover that not all chords work. For example, when you see a G7th chord in a ballad or a song, should you use the G13th version or the G7 sharp 5 sharp 9? One of these will often sound better than the other, and this has to do with whether you're clashing with the melody and underlying scales. These are considerations that we'll look at in more depth once we start talking about soloing. However, until then, just simple experimentation will teach you a lot and is a great way to start. That's it for today's lesson. I hope you've learned something interesting, and I will see you next time.